Hi, this is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. I'm here at 160 Studios once again with my friend Joe Mullings. Thank you, Joe, for having me down here. And we're going to talk about surgical robotics, which is something I think you know a little bit about.
I thoroughly enjoy that category, and we'll talk a little bit about surgical robotics today, soft tissue, and you and I are chat about, I'm excited about the emergence of the endovascular robotics space as well, but where do you want to start?
There's so much going on. So at Device Talks Boston, we'll have, I'll be interviewing the executive team from CMR. We'll have Stryker represented, we'll have Quantum Surgical represented. We'll have Rajiv Kamel from Medtronic as our closing keynote, which will be a joint keynote between Device Talks Boston and our robotics events as well. He'll give a live demonstration on their remote connectivity. So lots of different players, lots of different sort of solutions or approaches to surgical robotics. I just feel like we're at a real crossroads, if that's the right analogy.
Inflection point.
An inflection point for sure. Thank you. That's better for surgical robotics. There's so much going on. So high level, what do you think of the time we're at in surgical robotics? Because it seems even more excited and uncertain, yet intuitive is still there, like making its presence known. But there's just a lot of different ways to look at it. So what's your level of excitement for surgical robotics at this time?
Well, I think the data speaks for itself, Tom. Right now, I think worldwide we're at 20 billion a year, and the reasonable projection worldwide it is going to be 80 billion a year in less than 10 years. So that's a 4x growth. That's a lot of growth.
Do we know where that comes from? Is it just people have projected the need for surgical robotic systems, the types of facilities that can use them? Because that is a huge growth for an area that's been kind of at this level, but I think we're all waiting for it to really spike.
Well, you mentioned you have quantum, which is not a soft tissue robotics, and I think that growth is not going to be in the soft tissue space.
Good point.
Okay, so quantum is in a totally different space. CMR's in the space, obviously, of course, but I think the endovascular space, which we can chat about, or the robotization of all of our therapeutics. Bain did a survey recently of surgeons and interventionalists, and 78% of them said they were interested in pursuing robotics in their practice.
Okay.
So that will be driving it. And if you think about the psychographic demographic coming up, if I can go ahead and drive a robot, and please take soft tissue out of your head when we think about robotics, and think about using something either the therapeutic or diagnostic perspective, right? So you've got companies that are really pushing the envelope in the endovascular marketplace, like Shifamed has a platform they're working on. Imperative Care with Fred Khosravi, he's got a platform that they're working on. You've got Microbot, you've got certainly, Siemens struggling with the old Corindus acquisition. They finally bailed on the cardiology side and went to stroke now. The ASC world, you've got cath labs moving into ASC. There's about 100 cath labs that are ASCs right now nationwide. There's another 50 that are under construction right now.
Okay.
And you can be pretty sure that there's going to be a robotic component either in the imaging or the therapeutic side in a reasonably large number of those ASCs coming out of the ground.
That's a great point. I love the fact that you said put soft tissue aside, because I at least, when I say surgical robotics, I think Da Vinci and then the rest. And I just think of that category. But the growth is, you're right, it's going to come from all the other technologies that are going to service all the other markets that currently aren't being tapped into it. And it makes sense also that hospitals and doctors, they're all short-staffed. I mean, robotics is a solution, is a way to help, a way to make people more efficient, I think to raise their abilities. So it seems to be the perfect kind of technology that would come in and help with the healthcare struggles, or the labor struggles that healthcare is having.
Yeah, and look, right now in our firm, we've got 2 endovascular robotic searches going on at a C level or an EVP level. We've got a back of the eye ophthalmology robots, 2 going on.
Okay.
Right, I've got a number of orthopedic robotic companies coming on. I'm familiar with another great spine robot that should be released later this year that will be a clear and present threat to both Stryker's robot and Globus's robot. So you're going to start to see Gen 2 of those spine robots be able to offer much more than respectively just driving a screw.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about endovascular first. We can talk about soft tissue at the end. But we've talked about it a lot. What are some of the opportunities that you're seeing there? And just take a moment to sort of explain, what do you mean? how is this robot being used or robots being used and getting into the body and doing what they need to do?
Sure. So think about right now in an interventional neurologist or an interventional cardiologist. You're driving a wire or you're trying to put a device in a relatively tortuous type of sort of anatomy. And that takes, let's go back to your original point, that takes an enormous amount of skill, time, and practice to do. So one of the things that robotics does is greatly accelerate the competency curve as well as the learning curve. So now I can start to drive a catheter or a guide wire or a delivery system down into a certain area that maybe took a person 10, 15 years to learn that skill set to be able to deploy it on premises. Then you add the sort of telerobotics side of things as well, right? So now you've just expanded the marketplace there in that area. These robotic systems are also much less expensive. So you got somebody like Microbot, that's a throwaway robot. Literally, I don't know what the cost of goods are, but let's just say it's $50 for the plastic sort of console that sort of, that drives the guide wire. And then thereby, after you can drive the wire, you can drive the other therapeutic devices that go over the wire, right? So you've got that technology. And then endovascular, whether it's cardio, whether it's neuro. Then you've got the large format big metal, like you've got the Corindus robot out there. And let's just say, for argument's sake, the imperative care robot as well, right? So these are going to be able to allow us to be more efficient, more precise, use less devices, accelerate the competency curve, and you're not talking about $1.5 million for a robot. So your adoption rate is going to be a lot more rapid there versus $1.5 million plus $750,000 of a maintenance fee every year, plus a higher cost of disposables on the soft tissue robot. So we have to be really careful that we're not comparing the robotic space of soft tissue with the same dynamics of the cost of therapy and the cost of technology on the non-soft tissue robotic space, form factor, size, as well as cost.
Interesting. So what does that what does the adoption of endovascular robotics look like in the next couple of years? Where are we in terms of approval, and what do you see that looking like again 3 or 4 years from now?
It's always tough to call what the FDA is going to do on robotics. They keep on moving the goalposts appropriately in most cases for the patient safety, right? But you have I think you have a much less complex robotic system than soft tissue. On soft tissue, you've got major issues. You've got first of all, collision issues with the arms. You've got issues with end effectors. You've got issues with a lot of the technology. The more complex, the more the FDA gets into. When you're driving a wire into the anatomy, you have certainly areas that the FDA has to be concerned with, but you've already got cleared endovascular devices on the catheter side. You've got a robot that is already got potentially 5, 10, or at least a predicate on it with some of the devices out there, if you're going to look for this and some of the RoboCath and some of the others. So I think you're going to have a much more accelerated route there, a lower cost center, thereby you're going to have higher adoption and higher utilization. And I think you've got companies that like Becton Dickinson, like Boston Sci, even maybe Edwards, dare I say, that would have a high adoption rate of these robotic platforms because they drive usage of their devices.
And that was the intention of the robotic systems, or at least the way the robotic systems are looked at as a way to deliver the devices. So that makes great sense. You mentioned Stryker's spine robot earlier, or a spine robotic company that could pose a threat to Stryker's robot and Globus's as well. Speaking about Stryker for a moment, do you see them building on their surgical robotics franchise, adding another robot in? I mean, they've got the orthopedic sector, I don't want to say locked up, but they're the force there. Do they continue to expand in other sectors?
It'll be interesting to watch. If you had to force me to ask yes or no, I'd have to say yes. It's just the timeline. So if you're a large strategic, you're eventually going to have to incorporate robotics into your portfolio. Kevin is very specific, or his team's very specific on the technologies they tend to index towards. But I would not be surprised if they were not having conversations right now with a couple of the soft tissue robotic platforms that are out in the market.
Interesting.
You might see them pick up a next generation spine robot sooner than later, for a number of reasons, because the generation of their robot as well as the Globus robot is first gen. And while some things have been done to it, there's one or two robotic companies, one that I saw out was JP Morgan, when I was off site, that is a very clear and present threat. I think it's going to raise a lot of eyebrows. It'll probably get taken out pretty quickly. So I'd see Kevin go into that. And look, they've got a great imaging navigation portfolio. So I wouldn't be surprised if they started to move into soft tissue sooner than later.
Interesting. Now let's talk a little more about soft tissue. Zooming back, Da Vinci announced their version 5 will be coming out this year. What's your sense of that, of the timing? Again, it just sort of seemed to be, to me, it looked like a reminder that Intuitive was saying, like, we're still here, we're still innovating. All these other folks can introduce new systems, but we're not done yet as well.
Look, that was a brilliant move by Intuitive, right? To say Gen 5's coming out this year, even if it's not here yet. Because any hospital that was thinking about buying a robot right now, and this is a problem for Hugo, anybody who was thinking about buying a robot right now is going, okay, let's just wait to see what Gen 5 is, right? So that put everything on hold.
Interesting.
So that's number one. Intuitive, in their earnings call, had mentioned that their lease rates were up from 42% to 48%. Wouldn't be surprised. It'd actually be a great move for Intuitive, and they're going to start with their financing aggressively.
So that's a percentage of people leasing? What are those numbers?
42 to 48%, I believe, if I understood it right. That's the number of leases that they had. That lease jumped up. So if you go from 42 to 48%, that's almost 20% increase.
Yeah.
That's not 6% increase, right? So you're going to start to see the leasing capabilities of of Intuitive in particular. They're going to have an entire financing arm, not anything unlike GE does and Siemens does. But what does that mean? Gary is going to be better off taking his money and putting into his leasing program to get more installs out in the marketplace, to then drive the disposable revenue and increase the total addressable market there before potentially CMR makes it through FDA, which what they're in on right now, before Hugo can get any traction. We'll wait to see what happens with J&J with the Ottava release. It's in the public domain right now. I'm not speaking out. Is what's going on with Auris right now, and therefore their soft tissue platform. There's a major lawsuit being considered right now. I think it's in debate in the hands of the judge, if I'm not mistaken. That didn't make anybody look good. If you get a chance to look at the pretrial sort of documentation. So I don't know what J&J is going to do until that sort of declares itself, which is going to be sooner than later. But Gary, with the Gen 5 release, the increase in leasing, the ability to do the financing, hospitals are going to say, I don't have $1.5 million. Intuitive is going to be able to say, great, wait for the Gen 5. If you don't want the Gen 5, we'll take care of it for you. That's going to be a challenge to some of the other players coming out right now that are trying to get into the market, potentially like the Distals, potentially like the Moons, potentially like the CMRs, because now you can potentially bring a soft tissue robot into the game. We'll see, and then one last thing is we'll see what Intuitive has up their sleeve for the ASC world. I can't believe that Intuitive does not have a platform to address the ASC world.
Does that require a change in strategy or actually a change in the size of a system, isn't it?
Well, look, all Intuitive does is, right now, I think that's going to change in the next couple of years, is make a soft tissue robot. Do you think that Gary has not been developing 5 different versions of a soft tissue robot in his facility, and he's just waiting to see where some of these other players play their cards?
Maybe he's a multitasker. Maybe he
all you do is think about robots all day long, right? So I've got to believe they've got something up their sleeve for the ASC. It'll likely declare itself sometime in 2025 as that market continues to sort of evolve. And will it be a Gen 5 Lite or something like it? Highly likely. I just can't believe that he's going to ignore that model or try and put down a chopped down version of a Da Vinci in there. So I think he's probably got 2 or 3 versions with the brilliance, talent, and money he has. That's too big of a market to disregard.
So we'll go back to the beginning. It feels as if we are in an inflection point, and hearing everything I just heard today, we certainly are at an inflection point. We ain't seen nothing yet, it feels like, with surgical robotics.
Yeah, look, it's where the market's going. Not the entire market, but tens of billions of dollars, so you better be in it to play.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Joe, for your insights and for having me down here at 160.
Always a pleasure, my friend.